I always thought I was someone who doesn't scare easily. I live alone in an old standalone apartment on the edge of the city, working remotely as a video editor. I'm alone during the day, and alone at night. Life is quiet, like a still surface of water with no ripples. Until that morning, when I received a package. There was no order history, no tracking number, and no sender information. It was just sitting neatly at my doorstep, an ordinary cardboard box, with one thing unusual about it: a line scrawled in red ink on the corner. "You should remember this place." My first thought was it was some kind of prank or scam. After all, I've left my shipping address on plenty of websites. Maybe a brand made a mistake. I brought the box inside and opened the tape. Inside were three things: a small, old mini camcorder, a single VHS tape, and a yellowed postcard with a note on the back. It said, "Do you still remember the forest where you got lost? You never really left." I froze. When I was 5, I did go missing in a forest. Not for long, just a few hours, and I was eventually found by a park ranger. I hardly ever talked about it. I don't remember much. My parents never brought it up again, except to say I kept saying strange things back then. Like there's another house like ours inside the forest. I stared at the VHS tape for a while, then finally gave in. I dug out my old player and inserted the tape. At first, the screen was black, like the camera was hanging from something. Then the image slowly lit up. Shaky footage passed through a forest trail. The picture was grainy, but something about the layout of the trees, the terrain, it all felt disturbingly familiar. I could almost smell that damp, musty scent of forest floor. The recording was 10 minutes long. For the first 7, nothing happened. Just the camera weaving through trail after trail. Then, around minute 8, it stopped. The camera focused on a small house overgrown with vines. The door was half open, the roof partly caved in, like it had been abandoned for years. My heartbeat quickened. I recognized that house. It had appeared in my childhood dreams more than once. The camera crept toward the entrance, as if the person filming was about to go in. But just then, the footage glitched. In the next frame, there was a child standing in front of the camera. He was facing away, standing at the doorway, wearing a blue hoodie and jeans, the same outfit I wore in my childhood photos. A cold shiver ran through me. The boy turned around. That face was mine at age 5. But his expression was blank, lips slightly curled, eyes unfocused. Like he was looking at me, but not really. Then he slowly raised his hand and pointed straight out of the frame, as if saying, "Come here." I shut off the power with a snap and jumped back. I didn't understand who filmed this or how that child appeared in the footage. But I knew it wasn't a prank. That face, that posture, that was me. I put the camera back in the box. I thought about calling the police, but how would I explain this? Who would believe me? I even started wondering if I had been hypnotized. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I heard a faint scratching at the door. Like someone was drawing or writing something on it. I held my breath and crept to the peephole. It was pitch black outside, but the sound continued, slow and steady, scraping bit by bit. I finally fell asleep after sunrise. When I woke up, it was quiet again. I built up the courage to open the door and saw something carved into the wood. "You haven't finished the tape." I swear my mind went completely blank. It was like something else took over me as I plugged the player back in and resumed the video. This time, it skipped past the boy and went to an empty bedroom. The camera slowly turned toward an old mirror. In the mirror, there was no camera. Just the boy standing behind you. I rushed to turn off the power, yanked out the plug, and this time, I took the camera out back and threw it into the alley dumpster, wrapped in 3 layers of garbage bags. But the next morning, when I woke up, the package was back at my doorstep. I opened it. It was empty, except for a small note. "When are you coming back? I work as a delivery driver, running Uber Eats and DoorDash at night. The job is flexible, but sometimes it gets a little weird, especially late at night. Many roads on the edge of the city don't have street lights, and cell signal is spotty. The worst is when an order comes with a vague or unclear address. That Thursday night, it was drizzling and almost 1 a.m. I was about to call it a night when my phone pinged with a new order, 1 fried rice and a milk tea, delivery to 241 Blue Oak Road. The pay was good, better than it should be for that distance. I opened Google Maps and typed in the address. But strangely, there was number 241 Blue Oak Road on the map. There was only a gray dot. The route showed a detour-suggested message, with a warning, "Some roads unmarked, please be cautious." I should have cancelled immediately, but business had been slow all night. I figured it was just a new development or the map wasn't updated. I decided to take the last run and call it a day. Following the GPS, I drove into the northern district near the outskirts. The roads got narrower and narrower, the street lights disappeared, and only my headlights lit the gravel road ahead. After about 10 minutes, the GPS suddenly vibrated, and the screen switched from 2D map to a strange 3D simulation. The entire display blurred and darkened. Buildings looked like translucent outlines. Then it spoke, "Approaching destination, turn right onto Oak Lane, hidden path activated." I'd never heard that before. I slowed down, and sure enough, a narrow dirt road appeared ahead, like a forest driveway. The ground was muddy and covered with fallen leaves, but tire tracks were visible. I thought it was a GPS error or some secluded private property. I hit the gas and bumped down the lane. Up ahead was a house. A 2-story wooden house that looked very old. The windows were boarded up, the walls weathered, eaves dripping water. The only light was a dim yellow bulb above the door. No house number, no other houses around, just thick forest. I parked, grabbed the food, and walked up to the door, pressing the doorbell. Ding dong. No answer after 10 seconds. I knocked and called out, "Uber Eats delivery." That's when I noticed a plastic folding table next to the door. A handwritten note was taped on it, "Please leave the food on the table, thank you for coming." I figured fine, contactless delivery was common. I was about to put down the food when I heard a click behind me. I spun around, no one there. But my car door was open. The driver's side light was on. I was sure I locked it. I rushed back, checked inside, empty, nothing missing. I locked it again and slammed the door. When I turned around, I nearly screamed. On that folding table was something new. An old yellowed photo of the very house I was looking at, only it was taken in daylight. On the back was written, May 12, 1973, disappearance case, house unregistered, no official address. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the photo and got in the car. But the map went blank. Google Maps screen was completely empty, GPS lost signal. All nearby signals were gone, even my phone's clock froze at 1:27 a.m. I drove in circles, and the dirt road I came in on vanished. I had no choice but to push into the forest, trying to find a way out. After a while, I saw a house again. Exactly the same one. I checked the address again. It still said 241, Blue Oak Road. Like I never left. This time the door was slightly ajar. I didn't go forward. I tried backing up and turning around, but every turn led me back to that same house. Then my phone lit up on its own. A new message popped up, "Delivery complete, thank you for your return visit." My fingers trembled as I opened the app. For the past 2 years, every delivery record ended with 241, Blue Oak Road. I looked back at the photo again. In the window behind the house, a blurry face seemed to be smiling at me. I worked the night shift at a large hospital downtown. My job title is Nighttime Administrative Coordinator, which sounds impressive but really means handling patient family paperwork, answering phones, logging ward updates, and sometimes helping out in the ER. The hospital at night is quieter than you might imagine. Except for the occasional drunk or injured patient brought into the ER, most departments are silent. The ward floors have only a few night lights on, and the hallways feel empty, a bit like an old hotel. That night was a rainy Wednesday. I was at the front desk, going through system data, sipping cold convenience store coffee. At 2:15 a.m. an elderly woman walked into the lobby. Her hair was neatly combed, she wore a gray raincoat, and dark blue fabric shoes with no visible brand. She wasn't carrying an umbrella, but her hair was dry. She held a doll, her eyes a little distant. "Excuse me. My granddaughter's doll was lost here today, probably in a room on the 14th floor, she said slowly, gently, but there was something strange in her tone. I paused. The 14th floor, but our hospital only has 13 floors. She frowned slightly, as if not understanding. Before I could ask more, she placed the doll next to the lost and found box at the counter. I'm just returning it. It was still looking for this when it left. I glanced at the doll. I recognized it. Last Saturday, a 6-year-old girl passed away here from a sudden brain tumor. I remembered the case clearly because her mother broke down right there. The girl had always clutched a red doll. But the family had taken the doll when they left the hospital. I saw them carry it away. You said. You found this today? I asked carefully. She smiled but didn't answer, then slowly walked away. I wanted to call her back, but she moved slowly through the lobby, stepped out into the rain, and vanished as if dissolved into the mist. That night I was restless. I double-checked patient records, confirming the girl's death time, room number, and family contacts. Everything matched. That was 6 days ago. How could the doll still be here, and why was it in the hands of an old woman claiming to be from the 14th floor? I checked the security cameras. From 2 to 2:30 a.m. I scanned the lobby footage. There was no sign of the old woman. But I saw the doll. At 2:15 a.m. the footage showed the doll appearing by itself on the lost and found box. Like someone quietly placed it down and left, except no one was there. I couldn't sleep that night. My heart raced sitting behind the desk. At dawn, I wrapped the doll in a bag and locked it in the medical supply cabinet. I never told anyone. But it didn't end there. 2 days later, Friday at 3 a.m. while on shift, I got a call. Lost and found. Hello. Silence for a few seconds, then a little girl's voice. I can't find my doll. Have you seen it? I thought it was a patient's child calling, ready to ask who and which room, but she said, I walked too fast that day, it couldn't keep up. Can you bring it back to the 14th floor? I froze. What did you say? Which floor are you on? The 14th floor, she said, sounding a little impatient. My voice trembled. But we only have 13 floors. Silence for 3 seconds. Then in a flat, emotionless tone, the girl said, "That's the floor you can't see," and hung up. The caller ID showed unknown. I checked the hospital system again. Yes, the 13th floor was the highest. But I clearly remembered when my dad had surgery here as a kid, I once pressed an unlit elevator button to a floor that shouldn't have existed. I thought it was a trick of my imagination. This time, I decided to find out for myself. At 3:30 a.m., I grabbed a flashlight, my ID badge, and the doll, then took the west elevator, the oldest in the hospital, usually only used by cleaning staff. The doors closed, the buttons lit up. 1, 2, 3. Up to 13. Then I noticed a gray unnumbered button below, looking broken, but I pressed it. It beeped, and the elevator started ascending. Beyond the 13th floor, it kept going. The doors opened. Before me was a floor that shouldn't exist, old floors, yellowing lights, cracked walls, no medical equipment or desks, like an abandoned ward frozen in time. I carefully walked down the hall. The air smelled like mold mixed with disinfectant. At the end of the hall was a room, its door half open. I stepped in and saw an empty hospital bed. Beside it sat a blurry figure with head down, completely still like a child. "You're the one who called that night." She didn't look up, only held out her hands. Hesitantly, I placed the doll in her lap. She hugged it and slowly raised her head. I will never forget that face, expressionless, mouth curved slightly, eyes completely blank. The next moment, all the lights went out. The entire floor plunged into darkness. I ran with all my might back to the elevator, nearly falling as I jumped in. The doors closed just as I heard a child's laughter slowly echoing down the hall. Back in the lobby, my clothes were soaked and my hands shaking. I never told anyone what happened. But the doll never appeared again, and no one else ever saw that old woman. Only I know that this hospital has a floor not meant for the living. I live in an old 3-story house, a typical brown brick structure common in American suburbs, built in the 70s. The layout is simple: a basement, a living floor, and an attic-style bedroom. There are 2 staircases, one from the basement to the first floor, and another from the first floor up to the second floor bedrooms. The house originally belonged to my grandmother. After she passed away a few years ago, I moved in. Everything was normal, except for the occasional sounds of small animals crawling inside the walls, which wasn't unusual. Until last month, when I noticed something strange about the stairs. It was Monday morning. I overslept and hurried downstairs to get ready for work. As I rushed down the stairs, I suddenly felt my step was different, like I had stepped on an extra stair. I stopped and looked back at the staircase. I counted the steps. 14. No, that wasn't right. I clearly remembered there had always been 13 steps. I knew this because a few years ago, when I installed carpet, I measured them myself. At first, I thought I had miscounted, but something felt off. After work that day, I took out a tape measure and notebook to check again. From the first floor to the second floor, there were now 14 steps. Each step was the same height and depth, with no signs of added or modified construction. It was as if the staircase had always been 14 steps. I pulled up old photos. Sure enough, one was a selfie I took standing at the stairs. I zoomed in and counted 13 steps, clear as day. "So when did the 14th step appear?" I asked the plumber who had fixed my pipes before. He also said he remembered 13 steps. I started having trouble sleeping. Because since that day, I began hearing footsteps on the stairs. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, there was a click-click sound coming from downstairs, slowly climbing step by step. I thought it was a cat, but I don't have pets. I thought maybe mice, but the rhythm was too steady, too heavy. One time I waited at the stair landing, holding a baseball bat, ready to scare whatever it was. The sound stopped. I looked down, nothing there. But I had clearly heard it just a few steps below me. The strangest part was that the 14th step only appeared at night. During the day, no matter how many times I counted, there were always 13 steps. But at night, when I got up to use the bathroom or walk downstairs, whether I counted or not, my step always landed with an extra thud, like I was forced to step on a specific stair. I decided to install cameras. I put 2 at the bottom and the landing of the stairs, set to record on motion detection. Then I waited. On the third night at 2:46 a.m. the footage showed the stairs empty, but the microphone clearly picked up the footsteps, step by step, slowly going up. But on the video, the 14th step was empty, as if it existed in a dimension the camera couldn't capture. That wasn't all. On the 5th night, while reviewing footage, I saw something pass through the frame at 3:12 a.m. for 1 second. The screen flickered and a shadow darted from the left. The shape was distorted, no clear outline, just a shadow on the wall gently shaking for 2 seconds. That night I stayed in a hotel. I didn't dare go home for days, only returning during the day to grab things or feed the water pump. But then I noticed something even more unsettling. Scratches started appearing on the wood of that 14th step. Like something climbed out every night from that step and then climbed back. The scratches spread from both sides to the newel post, some even creeping up the stairs a foot at a time. I tried prying open the wood under the step and found a hollow space. And that hollow didn't lead down but went straight into the wall, extending all the way up to the roof. Something lived inside. I tore out that step, replaced it with a sealed steel plate, and had someone seal the wall cracks with cement, filling the inside with expanding foam. That night I finally slept deeply. No sounds, no footsteps, and the stairs were back to 13 steps. I thought it was over. Until 2 days later, when I walked upstairs to my room. I stepped onto the 13th step and suddenly my foot missed a step, as if the 14th step had returned. I looked down. It was there again. On it lay a note, as if placed deliberately, that read, "You can seal the stairs, but you cannot seal our path." I didn't dare live there anymore. I sold the house to a retired couple and said little. But sometimes, I still dream of that staircase. It stretches endlessly, impossible to finish climbing, and cracks that look like eyes appear on the walls. And every time I dream of it, I wake up standing at the stair's edge, barefoot, staring at the 14th step slowly leaking a puddle of water. I had just moved to a small town in central Oregon called Miller Creek. The town was small with cheap housing and was near a national forest, about a 30-minute drive to the city. I took a remote programming job hoping to find a quiet place to focus, and this place was perfect. 2 weeks after moving in, I started taking walks in the late afternoon. From my backyard I crossed a few fields and came to a winding forest path. The path was a bit overgrown, but you could tell it had been maintained before. The ground was paved with old stones and there were a few wooden stakes along the sides. I asked some neighbors, and older folks said the path was once used by lumberjacks, but the logging camp had been abandoned and no one used it anymore. I loved the quietness of that path. Every time I walked it I felt disconnected from the outside world. Until one day. That day I walked especially far. I must have been walking for about 45 minutes when the sky grew dark. I was about to turn back, but then I saw a wooden sign by a fork in the path. It looked very new, not like the old signs around, but freshly nailed. The wood still smelled fresh. On the sign were carved a few words. Hollow Bend John Lee Carr. I froze. Because that name was mine. My name is John Lee Carr. I had never told anyone I was coming here. I had never checked in on social media, and I paid rent in cash. I am the kind of person with almost no digital footprint. But that name not only matched but had the exact middle name too. The fork led deeper into the woods and the sign hung above, a small note stapled below it. We have been waiting for you, welcome home. A chill ran through me and I ran away. That night I could not sleep. I tried checking Google Earth to see where the fork went, but the images were blurry, as if deliberately tampered with. I even had a friend from out of state send me a drone, hoping to scout the place during the day to see if there were any houses or buildings, or if it was some kind of prank. 3 days later I returned to the path carrying the drone, a map and 2 GoPro cameras. I followed my memory to the fork. My heart raced and my hands were sweaty. But the sign was gone. Not just the sign, the wooden stakes, the nail marks, the note, the leaf patterns were all gone. The ground looked as if the fork had never existed. It was just a row of old stone bricks extending into the woods. I stood there for a long time, then decided to follow the direction where the fork used to be. After about 10 minutes the trees grew taller and the sunlight dimmer. Just as I thought to stop, my drone controller buzzed. It turned on by itself and the screen showed a signal. I jumped because I had not pressed any buttons. On the screen was a wooden cabin seen from above. The roof was worn and there was an old rocking chair by the door. The sign with my name was still there, standing in the middle of the grass. Suddenly a figure came out of the cabin. The shape was blurry, but it wore exactly the same clothes as me. The figure looked up at the sky and raised a hand as if waving at the camera. I looked up quickly, but all around were just the sounds of wind and birds. That night I stayed home and did not go out again. The next morning I received an email. The sender was blank and the subject read, "Don't look anymore." The body contained only a screenshot of the cabin door. A wooden sign hung on it that said, "Welcome back, John," and in the door crack a black and white photo peeked out. I zoomed in and the photo showed me. I was sitting on the rocking chair smiling naturally. But I had no memory of ever taking that picture. Since then I have avoided the forest and switched to working during the day with all the lights on at night. Weeks later the landlord said someone wanted to see the house and I had to move. I asked why so suddenly. He said the house was never mine, it was reserved by my family ahead of time, but now it was time for someone else to return. I said I have no family, I have lived alone since college. I asked who reserved it. The landlord just smiled and said probably your grandfather, he used to live here too and was the last person to disappear from that cabin. It was early Sunday morning around 5:30. The sky was still dark, but I suddenly woke up. No alarm, no dream, just wide awake with a strange sense of unease. I live in a quiet neighborhood near a small lakeside town in Washington state. Normally on weekends at this time it's silent except for some birds chirping or a neighbor's dog turning in its sleep. But that morning I heard a sound. Clank. The mailbox. The old metal mailbox door opening and closing. I thought maybe the mailman came early, but I checked my phone and it wasn't delivery time yet. I looked out the window but the street was empty. The early morning fog hadn't cleared. Street lights were still on, shining on my mailbox. Hesitating, I put on a jacket and went outside. The mailbox was open. Inside was something, not mail or a package, but a VHS tape in a black plastic case, old and faded. No label, no writing, no address or name, like someone purposely left it there. I looked around, no cars, no people, the whole street was silent like frozen in time. After a moment I took the tape inside. Problem was I don't own a VCR. Those were outdated years ago. But I remembered my basement had some old boxes with my grandpa's stuff including a Sony VCR. I opened the basement door, dust hit me in the face, the smell of old wood and mold came up the stairs. I turned on the light and carefully went down the creaky steps. I found a black Sony VCR tangled with its cords and plugged it in. It powered on with a faint hum and flickered on screen. Sitting in the living room I inserted the tape and pressed play. The screen was black then flickered. A blurry image appeared. It was my house. From across the street, shaky handheld footage with heavy static, but my door, driveway, and porch light were clear. The cameras slowly moved closer to my door. My heart raced. I didn't remember anyone filming my house or giving permission. The time on the footage was night, grainy black and white, no clock visible. The camera moved from the bushes as if the filmer was crawling low. It filmed my door, windows, living room light and even my bedroom window. I remembered I hadn't closed the curtains the night before. The screen went black, then after a few seconds a new scene appeared. My hallway from inside the house. I froze staring at the screen. The filmer stood at the bottom of my stairs filming up to the bedroom door. They slowly walked up step by step. At the door the footage flickered and showed me sleeping. I was wearing my pajamas from the night before, lying on my side completely unaware. The clock in the background read 3:42 a.m. Cold sweat ran down my back as I stared dead at the screen. The video ended with black then white text like a typewriter message: "You are watching yourself from yesterday. Tonight I want to film a different angle." The tape stopped. I sat on the couch frozen for over 10 minutes, mind a mess. I called 911. Police came and searched the house. No signs of break-in, locks intact, windows closed. They took the tape as evidence but didn't seem to believe my story. One officer even asked, "Are you sure you didn't film this yourself?" Before I said nothing. That night I locked every door and window, closed all curtains and piled furniture against my bedroom door. I sat on the bed clutching a kitchen knife, phone flashlight on, recording app running. At 5:30 a.m. I heard the sound again. Clank. I ran to the window. The street was empty again. Thick fog, street light, mailbox. Slowly I went outside shaking as I opened the mailbox. Inside was a new tape. This time a red marker message was written on the case: "You want to skip this part?" I stood frozen, not daring to move. I never opened that tape. I sealed it up and locked it deep in my basement cabinet. But I know this is not over. Because 3 days later in a supermarket parking lot after shopping I saw a note on my windshield: "Your neck looked especially beautiful today. I want to film your smile tomorrow." I live in a quiet neighborhood in Nevada. The houses are neatly lined up, not many residents, and everyone knows each other. Every Saturday someone hosts a community barbecue. Honestly, life was pretty peaceful, at least until that Tuesday evening at 7. That day I was finishing work and preparing dinner. It had just gotten dark, and the local news was on TV. Then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Exactly 7 o'clock. Strangely, the doorbell sounded a little slow. Like someone deliberately lowering the pitch, stretched out longer than usual. I never order delivery or expect visitors at that time. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. No one outside. The front yard light was on, but no shadows. No cars on the street, no footsteps. I opened the door and peeked out. Nothing. I scanned the area. The grass was neat, the doormat untouched, no packages. The wind rustled the leaves. Uneasy, I closed the door and went back to eat. The next day I posted on the community website asking if anyone had mistakenly rung my doorbell. No replies. Everyone seemed unaware. I quickly forgot about the little incident. Until the next Tuesday, exactly 7 p.m. again, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. This time I rushed to the door. The porch light came on automatically before I got close. I looked through the peephole, still no one. But something new was on the ground. A photo. I opened the door and bent down to pick it up. It was a Polaroid with yellowed edges, blurry but clearly a picture of my kitchen. The cup on the table, unopened mail, the calendar on the wall exactly the same. I had taken a similar photo that afternoon to document cabinet damage for the insurance company. But I never sent it, it stayed on my phone. My scalp tingled as I checked my phone. The photo was still there with the correct timestamp 3:47 p.m. I called the police immediately. They searched the house but found nothing suspicious. No signs of break-in, windows intact. They thought the photo on the porch was likely a prank. After the police left, I changed the locks, reset all cameras, and installed an indoor door camera. For a few days everything was normal. Until the next Tuesday. I didn't even wait till 7. I left work early, turned on all the lights, locked the door, and started recording with my phone. 7 p.m. sharp. Ding dong. This time I didn't open the door immediately. I checked the live feed. The doorway was empty. Then I slowly opened the door. The peephole, cameras, motion sensors showed nothing. But under the doormat was a USB drive. Wearing gloves, I carefully picked it up and plugged it into an old laptop not connected to the internet. There was only one video file titled doorcam_0700.mov. I played it. The footage was from my front door, shot low as if placed on the doorstep tile. The recording time was exactly 7 p.m. last Tuesday, the night I picked up the photo. It clearly showed me stepping outside and bending down to pick up the photo. But the strangest thing. As I turned to go back inside, a shadow flickered in the lower left corner of the video, a person wearing exactly the same clothes as me standing behind a tree watching. They didn't move or speak, just stood still. I never noticed them that night. I closed the video, frozen in place, chills down my spine. I began to suspect I was being followed or even copied. I sent the video to the police. They couldn't identify the figure but advised me to stay elsewhere and report any suspicious activity. I did. I stayed with a friend and prepared to sell my house and leave. I thought it was over. Until last week when I found an unsigned letter on my friend's dining table. Inside was only one line, "The doorbell here rings at 8, right? I live in an old 4-story apartment building on the edge of downtown St. Louis, Missouri. The building has only 8 units, and most neighbors are just acquaintances. We occasionally exchange greetings in the stairwell but aren't close. The person who talks to me the most is my next door neighbor in unit 304, Mr. Collins. He's in his early 60s, lives alone, a bit quirky but generally kind. Every morning he goes to the coffee shop across the street to buy a newspaper and black coffee, then at noon sharp he taps 3 times on the wall between our apartments. We have a sort of code. 3 knocks mean he's noticed a leak upstairs or someone making too much noise late at night. He's not social but pays close attention to the sounds around him. One Friday I suddenly realized I hadn't heard those knocks for a few days. At first I thought he was traveling, but after a few days his mail started piling up in the door slot, newspapers scattered in the hallway. I tried ringing his doorbell and knocking but got no response. His apartment was dark all weekend, no sounds at all. On Monday I decided to call the police. They came by and knocked, but didn't force entry since there was no foul smell or obvious signs of trouble. They left a contact number and said they'd file a welfare check report. That Wednesday night I had a few drinks and suddenly remembered something Mr. Collins once said: if something happens, the best clues aren't words but sounds. He always used a very old landline phone and insisted on voicemail, the kind where you call and hear an automatic message. I had a sudden thought, if he was still alive maybe there was a message. I found his number and dialed. It was a very old-fashioned female voicemail system. Hello, you have reached the voicemail of Mr. Collins, please leave a message after the tone. But then I heard something that shouldn't have been on voicemail. Not a message but static, a buzzing sound for several seconds, then a very low voice said, "He's here, we want to let him speak." Then the sound of something dragging followed by a short muffled sob like someone trying to cry out with their mouth covered. Then silence. I froze. Not because of the sound itself but because it didn't sound pre-recorded, it sounded live, like someone was holding the phone recording that moment. I tried calling again but only got the normal voicemail greeting with no messages. I thought maybe I was imagining things, so I recorded the phone audio and sent it to a friend who does sound editing. He said the sound was fuzzy but after enhancement he could clearly hear the word help in the sobbing. We tried tracing the call but it was impossible with a landline. I gave the recording and evidence to the police. They finally got a search warrant and entered Mr. Collins' apartment. The place was clean and orderly, no signs of struggle or blood. The fridge was full and newspapers stacked on the table. The only odd thing was the phone was missing. The police said based on rental records and no family reports, Mr. Collins lived alone with no next of kin. He had no recent social service records, so he wasn't officially missing. But it didn't end there. A few days later I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer but it left a voicemail. When I listened there was silence at first, then, "You heard me right, I'm here now." Static repeated echo. "This is not my home, not my room, no windows here." The voice was definitely Mr. Collins'. I saved the voicemail and showed the police but they were helpless. They couldn't trace the source and even suspected I made it up. That night I had a dream. I dreamed Mr. Collins was sitting in a windowless room with an old-fashioned phone in front of him. He looked down at me mouthing words I couldn't hear. He raised his finger like trying to tell me something but I didn't understand. Then the phone rang. I answered in the dream and heard my own voice say on the other end, "He's not the only one, you're next." I woke up sweating. That morning my voicemail box had a message from an unknown number. Just one line: "Remember to knock 3 times at noon every day, you need to remind others to listen." I probably would have never talked about what happened if it weren't for the recent construction in that area. Someone uncovered the entrance to the tunnel and now I can't get it out of my head. It happened in 2017. I had just graduated from college and was working part-time at an architecture firm in the Midwest. The pay was low and the hours were long, but I had always been fascinated by urban archaeology, so when the company asked if anyone wanted to help investigate whether an old bomb shelter existed under a plot of land in the historic district, I volunteered right away. The site used to be a clinic built during the Japanese occupation. After the war it was turned into a small school infirmary and later fell into ruin. I did a bit of research and found that back in the 1930s it was once labeled a mental and physical health facility meant to isolate those considered unfit for society. The reports were vague and no one looked too deeply. It was a Saturday. Only me and a site assistant named Akwan were assigned to check it out. He was a bit older than me, careful and quiet. We arrived around 9 a.m. The excavator had already cleared some of the area, revealing a concrete and rubble-sealed hole. According to old plans it used to be a stairwell leading down to a basement storage area. The moment I saw the hole I felt uneasy. It didn't look like a regular sealed entrance. It looked like something had been buried in a hurry, like they wanted to erase it. We spent nearly an hour clearing away debris. When we finally opened it, the smell hit us hard, a wave of damp earth and mold, like something had been trapped in there for decades. I shined my flashlight down a narrow staircase stretched into the dark with no visible end. We joked about maybe finding old gold or weapons from the war. Then we grabbed our lights and headed in. The stairs were short, only about 30 steps, but the air was heavy. The walls were lined with old moisture-resistant wallpaper, peeling in places to reveal bare concrete. I pulled out my sketchbook to start a quick diagram when Akwan suddenly asked me, "Did you hear that?" I stopped and listened. From deep within the tunnel came a faint, irregular tapping, not mechanical, not animal, more like someone was knocking on the wall with their fingernails. 3 taps, then a pause, then 3 more. We looked at each other but said nothing and kept walking. On both sides of the tunnel were iron doors, each one painted with faded red numbers: basement 17, basement 18. We walked until we reached number 19. That door was slightly open. I pointed my light inside and nearly dropped it as the beam hit the wall. The room held over a dozen metal beds neatly arranged. Each bed had a gray blanket and ropes like restraints for patients. In the corner was a chalkboard with the words written in dusty white chalk: social awareness training, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. But what chilled me to the bone was this: one of the restraints was still swaying slightly, as if someone had just stood up from that bed. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was air movement, but the tunnel was so silent even our breathing echoed. I didn't buy it. Akwan suddenly said he was going back up to grab some forms, then he left in a hurry. I was alone standing there in the hallway. All I could hear was the faint buzzing from my flashlight, and then again that tapping sound. 3 knocks from the direction of the stairwell. I told myself not to panic and kept investigating. About 5 minutes later I stepped into room 19 to look around more closely. Under one of the beds was a wooden cabinet. I crouched down and opened it. Inside were several old notebooks, the covers labeled with patient codes. I opened one and flipped through a few pages. What I read made my stomach twist. Patient D112 still experiencing social hallucinations at night, reports voices speaking, claims the walls are breathing, and identifies non-existent staff members. Action taken: isolation, sound reduction, observation. I flipped through more pages. Every patient had similar descriptions: hallucinations, visual and auditory, claims that the walls were moving. What disturbed me most was the last page, a single line written in red ink: "They are not inside, they are outside." I slammed the notebook shut and turned to leave. Just then I heard a click at the doorway, not the sound of a door closing, the sound of the lights going out. My headlamp was still on, but the hallway outside had gone pitch black. I ran out of the room trying to see if Akwan had returned, but the hallway was empty. Then I heard his voice calling me, "Hey, where are you?" It came from room 19, the very room I had just left. My heart froze. I slowly stepped back to the doorway and saw a shadow move across the beds. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted up the tunnel past doors 18, 17, 16, climbing the stairs. My headlamp flickered. The higher I got, like the place was rejecting light. I burst out into daylight, collapsing on the ground, barely able to breathe. Akwan was standing a few feet away, looking pale, holding the forms. I asked if he had come back down. He said, "No, I never went back. I was outside looking for you for nearly 30 minutes. I felt like throwing up. I didn't dare look back at the tunnel. I just grabbed his shoulder and said, "We need to leave now." He didn't ask much, just drove us back to the office and filed a simple report. 2 weeks later the company decided to seal the tunnel permanently. I didn't take part in the follow-up. I quit the job soon after. I've tried to convince myself it was all a hallucination, but sometimes I still dream about those beds, that notebook. I always wake up in a cold sweat. A while ago I saw a news report. They uncovered a tunnel during redevelopment, multiple sealed rooms, beds and old files. The officials called it a historical bomb shelter, said it would be preserved as a heritage site. They weren't telling the truth, because in the news footage next to one of the beds I saw something I will never forget. A notebook with the label D112. I never forgot that White House. I first saw it in October 2020 on a rainy weekend. I had just had a fight with my girlfriend Xiaoli and decided to take a drive alone. Somehow I ended up on a mountain road near Sun Moon Lake. I hadn't planned to camp out. I only brought a small hiking pack and a water bottle. It was already getting dark, but I noticed a small fork in the road on the map labeled Moon Lake Observation Point number 3. Out of curiosity I turned in. The road was rough and full of potholes. My car bounced so much it gave me a headache. After about 5 minutes the road ended at a 2-story white villa standing on a slope by the lake, surrounded by cedar trees. The walls were peeling and the windows were all sealed, but the structure was surprisingly intact. It looked like a place time had forgotten. I had no idea why a house like that was out here. Maybe it used to be a lookout point or a private retreat. I was caught between exhaustion, sadness and curiosity. The rain was light and fog hung in the air. I decided to get out and walk around the house. The back terrace overlooked the lake under the overcast sky. The surface was as still as black ink. Rain tapped on dead leaves with a crisp sound like someone snapping fingers right next to my ear. The front door was locked, but a wooden board had fallen from a window on the side. I pried it open with my hiking stick and climbed in. The air inside was thick with dust and rotting wood. A few paintings still hung on the walls. All of them were of the lake in cold, abstract colors. The strangest thing was an old piano in the corner of the living room. The lid was open and a yellowed piece of sheet music sat on the keys. It read, "Night Lake Suite Movement 9." The repeater. I sat on a broken couch, catching my breath. The silence around me was so complete I could hear nothing but my own breathing. One question kept circling in my mind: who built this place? Who had been here? And why wasn't this house marked anywhere on the map? I snapped a few photos and sent them to Xiaoli, hoping it would give us something to talk about, but she didn't reply. So I turned on my phone's recorder and spoke out loud everything I had discovered, like taking field notes. I never dared listen to that recording again. I meant to stay only a short while, but the rain picked up, so I decided to wait it out inside. The house seemed stable enough. It was getting darker. I turned on my phone flashlight and went upstairs. There were only 3 rooms upstairs. One of them was a study. A desk was covered in maps and notes. It looked like someone had done long-term research there. What stopped me cold was a large map pinned to the wall. A circle had been drawn around the words White House, Moon Lake. Outside the circle, radiating outward, were words written in a strange pattern: repeat, echo, imitate, illusion, voice, second person. I stared at that map for a long time, then went back downstairs. It was around 7 p.m. I laid out a waterproof sheet in a corner of the living room, planning to take a short nap and wait for the rain to ease. That was when I heard a creak from the wooden floor upstairs. My first thought was a wild animal. I picked up my hiking stick and called out softly, "Hello, anyone there?" No answer. About 30 seconds later the sound came again: creak, creak, like someone walking slowly above me. I started climbing the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. When I reached the study door, I saw it was closed. I was certain I hadn't closed it earlier. I pushed it open. It moved smoothly. No one was inside, but the map on the wall looked different. The words around the circle had multiplied. What used to be a single ring had grown into 2, then 3. It was like someone had added notes while I was gone. I forced myself to stay calm, told myself it was all in my head. I decided to leave the second floor. As I turned to go, my eyes caught something in the corner of the room. A figure. It was tall and thin, as if it were part of the wall, but you could feel it was human-shaped. I don't remember how I got back downstairs. My legs felt like they weren't even touching the ground. In the living room I was shaking as I gathered my things. Just as I was about to open the window and climb out, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Xiaoli. 3 words. "I am behind." I turned around instantly but there was nothing. The living room was still empty, but then I heard a sound. Ding ding. 2 notes played from the piano. I froze and slowly turned my head. Someone was sitting at the piano. That person was wearing the exact same jacket as me, carrying the same backpack, head tilted downward, one finger still resting on the keys. When he turned his head I didn't see the face clearly, but I remember one thing. It looked just like mine. I bolted for the window. My knee slammed into the frame. As I leapt out I rolled onto the wet grass and ran straight to the car, started it, locked it. The moment the reverse lights came on I saw them. 2 faces pressed against the window of the White House watching me. I never drove that road again. Later I reported it to the police. They went with me once the house was still there, but it was empty. No piano, no maps, no study room, just a single book left in the upstairs shelf, a sheet music book. The cover read, Night Lake Suite Movement 9, the repeater. It was winter of 2022. I had just moved from a big city to a remote small town, hoping to change my environment and escape the noise and stress. The town was small with few people and surrounded by old residential areas and abandoned factories. I rented a second-hand rental house. The landlord was an elderly man I rarely saw. He seemed a little strange but generally kind. The house was cheap, located on the edge of town next to an abandoned railway. It was an old building from the 1950s. The walls were moldy, the floor creaked, the windows had old wooden frames and glass. At night the wind made the windows tremble, giving off an eerie feeling, but I didn't mind. I just wanted a quiet place to rest and write. On the first night I turned the lights as bright as possible, checked the locks and windows, then I sat on the old sofa in the living room sipping hot tea, ready to start writing my first article. Outside the cold wind howled and the window glass shook softly like it was whispering to me. The house had 2 floors. The first floor had the living room and kitchen. Upstairs there were 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom. That night I slept in the room near the stairs. Upstairs the warm yellow light made the space feel cozy but also a little lonely. Around midnight, as I was about to sleep, I suddenly heard faint sounds downstairs. The noise sounded like light dragging footsteps, but I wasn't sure if it was a person or something moved by the wind. I frowned and got up to check. Just as I reached the stairway the sound stopped abruptly. The house fell silent again. My heart started beating faster. I wondered, could the landlord have forgotten to close the door, or maybe a wildcat got in? I took out my phone, turned on the flashlight and slowly went downstairs. The living room was empty, nothing unusual. The windows were closed and the door locked. I checked the kitchen and bathroom but found nothing. Just as I was about to go back upstairs my eyes caught something on the floor by the sofa, a dark muddy shoe print, like someone had just stepped there. I was sure I had taken off my shoes at the door. The landlord couldn't have come in secretly because the door had double locks. What made me more uneasy was the print was still wet, as if it had been made recently. I shivered and hurried upstairs, locked the door and windows, lay back in bed trying to calm down before falling asleep. I kept thinking about that shoe print. The next morning I decided to talk to the landlord. The old man wore an old-style shirt and looked pale. After hearing my story he frowned and was silent for a while. Then he said, "This house had some unusual incidents, but those were a long time ago. Are you all right?" I shook my head, feeling uneasy, but decided not to say more. After all, I still had to live here, keep working and continue my life. In the following days strange things kept happening. Every night between midnight and 1 a.m. I heard faint footsteps and dragging sounds downstairs. Sometimes I even heard low murmurs, but no matter how many times I went down to check, the place was always empty. What made me even more uneasy was the lights at home sometimes flickered on their own and a few times went completely out. The batteries of my phone and flashlight also seemed to drain at strange moments. One night I woke up feeling someone was in the room. I opened my eyes and saw a blurry figure standing at the door. The shadow was vague and unclear. I was so scared I immediately sat up and shouted, "Who's there?" The figure suddenly vanished and the room returned to silence. This went on for a week. I could hardly sleep. I was exhausted and my mind was confused until one night I set up a camera to record everything. Watching the footage I saw something unbelievable. A dark shadow slowly slid out from the stairway, drifting down the hall, then stopped in front of my door as if watching inside. It had no face, just a black outline. I held my breath, my heart pounded, I even doubted if I was seeing things, but that shadow was real, moving smoothly and eerily on the footage. The next day I hurried to confront the landlord. This time he spoke more heavily. He said this house used to belong to a small family many years ago. The wife and children mysteriously disappeared. The husband reportedly went insane and vanished. People say since that night the house has been haunted. He looked down and smoked. His eyes flickered with an indescribable fear. What you are encountering now might be their souls and some other things. I wanted to tear down this house, but the town forbids it, saying it is a historic building. I listened, feeling more chilled, but dared not move out easily. After all, life had already begun. I didn't want fear to defeat me. That night I stayed awake with my camera and phone ready for midnight. When the clock struck 12, the shadow appeared again. This time it didn't stop at the stairs but slowly walked toward my room. My hand trembled, wanting to turn on the light, but found the power cut off. The whole house plunged into darkness. Only my faint breathing and the shadow's drifting sound remained. I gripped my phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but the screen instantly went black as if disturbed by some force. Just as the shadow neared, I suddenly remembered what the landlord said: don't let it get close to your body and don't look into its face. I held my breath, closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. The shadow seemed to freeze. The room temperature dropped sharply, freezing cold. Time seemed to stop. I felt something lingering beside me, breath softly brushing my ear, but I couldn't make out any words. After a long time, I didn't know if it was minutes or seconds, a low hoarse voice whispered, "Leave, leave." I opened my eyes. The shadow vanished. The lights in the house suddenly came back on. My phone restarted. I grabbed my bag frantically, put on my coat and ran out without looking back. I started the car, drove away from that old street and that eerie rental house, heading straight for the big city. Until now I never dared go back. The memory card of the camera mysteriously malfunctioned. Later all the footage disappeared, leaving only that unspeakable fear and the whisper forever echoing in my mind. It was a night in autumn of 2018. Like usual, I was driving my long-haul truck on a remote highway somewhere in the American Midwest. The road was mostly empty all night, only a few headlights flickered from distant cars piercing the dark. The air outside was cold and crisp. Trees cast long shadows under the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel steadily, and low country music played softly in my headphones. Everything seemed calm. I had been driving for almost 6 hours on this road. Still about 300 miles to go. It was nearly 2 a.m. and my eyelids grew heavy. To stay awake, I rolled down the window to let the cold wind in. As I focused on the road ahead, a sudden bright light appeared in the distance. A big rig truck was speeding toward me from the opposite lane. What was strange was that the truck had no lights on. It didn't slow down either, just barreled forward as if the driver had lost control. The red glow of its headlights flashed fiercely into my eyes. A chill of dread immediately crept over me. Instinctively, I tightened my grip and moved my truck toward the shoulder, but the ghostly truck kept closing in, showing no sign of avoiding me. I barely had time to react. It came at me like a wild beast gone mad. At the last moment, I jerked the wheel hard and swerved onto the grass beside the road, narrowly avoiding a collision. The truck roared past me. On its metal front, I could see patches of fresh, bright red blood glistening in the dark, like it had just spilled. I froze in terror. My heart pounded. I blurted out, "Holy shit." Once I steadied my truck, I glanced back to check its tail lights. But the truck was gone. No skid marks. No sign it had stopped. As if it had never been there. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I scanned the empty road and darkness all around. No other cars. No people. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, telling myself it was just fatigue or a trick of the night. But the unease wouldn't fade. I kept driving, nervously watching the rear-view mirror. That's when I noticed the faint silhouette of the truck again, close behind me but flickering in and out of sight. Determined to figure out what was going on, I slowly pulled over to the shoulder and shut off the engine. The air outside felt even colder, with a musty smell. I stepped out and looked around, but found nothing. The night was eerily silent except for the occasional distant call of night birds. Just as I was about to get back in, I heard faint footsteps rustling in the grass behind me. I spun around but saw nothing. Cold sweat ran down my back. Looking back toward the highway, I could just make out the truck's shape. Its lights flickered erratically like a restless ghost. My heart raced. I hurried back inside, started the engine, and tried to speed away from that cursed stretch of road. No matter how fast I drove, the road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. The ghost truck stayed in front of me, never letting me pass. For hours the strange chase continued. Sometimes the truck disappeared, only to reappear. Whenever I tried to catch up or overtake it, it vanished mysteriously. Even stranger, my radio started to malfunction. It played broken, crackling noises, sometimes crying, sometimes moaning. At one point, I saw the truck's front turn toward me. Inside the cabin, a pale face appeared, hollow eyes staring blankly, mouth agape as if silently screaming. Terrified, I fled through the night trying to lose it. No matter which turn or exit I took, the truck followed relentlessly. I began to wonder if I was cursed or hunted by some dark force. Sleep eluded me for nights. I kept dreaming about the blood-stained truck speeding past. In my dreams, the driver's face became a blurry, pitch-black shadow. One day, desperate, I sought help from a local elder. The old man, over 70, told me this road had a fatal crash years ago. A truck lost control, crashing off the road and killing several drivers and passengers. Since then, the ghost truck would appear on quiet nights, searching for new victims. He said people tried to use charms and rituals to banish it, but nothing worked. The only advice was to avoid this road late at night. His words weighed heavy on me. I resolved to leave as soon as possible. On my last night before leaving, I drove that highway again, silently praying I wouldn't see the ghost truck. Sure enough, far ahead a familiar light appeared. The bloodied truck's front glowed in the dark. I gripped the wheel tight, ready to race through. But just as I neared, my truck suddenly jolted. The front hit an invisible wall. The whole vehicle stopped. The windshield shattered. I was thrown forward. Looking up, there was nothing but darkness and endless night. Gasping, I opened the door to run but felt something clutch my feet tightly. I turned around. On the empty road, a trail of blood stretched from beneath me toward the ghost truck's direction. At that moment, I knew I could never escape. It was a summer night in 2019. My two friends Asyang, Aji, and I decided to explore an old abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town. The park was called Happy Valley. It had suddenly closed down a few years ago. No one really knew why. Since then it had been left to decay and rumors said many strange things happened there. The three of us loved a good thrill. How could we miss a place like this? At dusk we drove to the entrance. The iron gate was kicked open. A faded no trespassing sign hung on the rusty frame. Most of the rides were broken and rusted. Weeds grew out of cracks and the air smelled of strong decay. We pulled out our phone flashlights and joked to ease the tension while exploring. Suddenly we heard heavy footsteps ahead like someone walking not far from us. "Is someone there?" asked Aji nervously. I looked closer and saw a man wearing an old suit standing under the Ferris wheel. He held a black leather bag. The dim light hid his face in shadows so I couldn't see his expression. "Hello, welcome to Happy Valley," he said in a calm deep voice. "My name is Mr. Ma, I was the last operator here." Ah Siang frowned. "This place was supposed to be closed, how are you still here?" The man smiled. "I have always been guarding this place and I have an invitation only for brave people like you." He pulled out a yellowed card from his bag. Written in gold letters were the words "The Last Game Invitation." "The last game?" I asked, puzzled. He nodded. "Yes, it is a game only true brave souls can complete it, and you will receive an invaluable reward." Aji gripped my arm, whispering, "This feels wrong." But our curiosity pushed us to accept. The man motioned for us to follow him. He led us to a seemingly new wooden cabin, the only intact structure in the park. The door was locked with an iron padlock, but it was already broken open. Inside was dim light and a round table with 3 cards and an old-fashioned spinning wheel. "The rules are simple," the man said. "Each of you draws a card, then take turns spinning the wheel and complete the tasks it points to. Fail and you face punishment." We exchanged glances, feeling the mood growing strange, but we were trapped. I drew the path of courage, Ah Siang got the mirror of truth, and Aji drew the door of time. The game began, the man announced. On the first round the wheel stopped at "Go alone to the haunted house." I took a deep breath and entered the rundown haunted house nearby. Inside was cold and damp, with yellowed photos and faded paintings on the walls. Broken dolls and rickety chairs lay in corners. Suddenly the door slammed shut. Dark swallowed me. My phone flashlight was the only light. I groped slowly, trying to find the exit, when I heard faint whispers behind me, like someone murmuring, but unable to scream. Fear filled my chest. Then a cold finger lightly touched my shoulder. I turned sharply but saw only empty room. In panic I found a yellowed note on the floor. It read, "The truth lies within the mirror." I grabbed the note and ran toward the haunted house door. The door opened slowly and the light outside eased my fear. Back at the cabin, Ah Siang and Aji looked serious. Ah Siang said he saw his reflection distort in a broken mirror, like another figure replaced him. He said that shadow stared at me, trying to pull me into the mirror. Aji said she was sent to an old clock tower. The clock hands reversed and she felt time twisting. She said, "I felt trapped there, never able to leave." The game grew more bizarre and threatening. Strange sounds came from corners. Blurred figures appeared outside the cabin. Low laughter echoed. It was my turn to spin. The wheel stopped at "Face your fear." My heart raced and the air turned cold. The man said coldly, "This is the final challenge." He led me to a dark room with a large mirror. When I looked into it, my reflection twisted into a horrific face, mouth ripped to my ears, eyes blood red. I stepped back in terror but found I could not move, as if bound by an invisible force. Behind me the man spoke low, "You cannot escape. Complete the game to earn your freedom." I tried to scream but no sound came. My reflection drew closer and closer. At the peak of my fear, Ah Siang burst in, yelling, "Quick, this game is a trap." We struggled with all our might and broke free, rushing outside. Dawn was breaking. The park looked desolate and broken, like a nightmare. The man and cabin were gone, leaving only rusted rides and empty grounds. In the car we were silent, swearing never to return to that cursed place. Later I learned the park was once a cult meeting ground. Many disappeared after playing the last game. The townsfolk kept the stories secret. That game is a deadly trap, no one ever escapes. When I moved into that old apartment I felt a flicker of hope. A new life should bring some freshness, right? The apartment was not new, it was old but conveniently located, reasonably priced, and I could see the shadow of an old banyan tree on the street corner, which made me, who liked quiet, feel quite comfortable. On the first night of moving in I was getting ready to sleep early as usual. The room was bathed in warm yellow light, the curtains hanging softly, and the air carried a faint smell of fresh paint. Just as I was about to close my eyes, a gentle piano melody floated by. The music was elegant and sad, not a typical practice piece but filled with an indescribable emotional turmoil. The sound was not loud, but in the deep quiet night it was especially clear, as if coming from the other side of the wall next door. I looked up toward that wall. It was the vacant unit next door. I remembered the landlord said that unit had been empty for a long time. No one had lived there since the previous tenant moved out. The piano music continued all night. Whenever I tried to ignore it, the sound became clearer, more real, as if telling a long buried story. The next day, out of curiosity, I asked some neighbors. Old Mr. Zhang said that unit used to be lived in by an old couple. The man was a pianist who mysteriously disappeared 20 years ago, and no one had seen him since. Some say his piano pieces hid secrets that made people cry. Others say the piano music was his soul expressing an unbearable pain. Old Mr. Zhang said softly. I started wanting to investigate. The night fell. I deliberately approached the wall. When the piano music played, the sound seemed to come from that downstairs vacant apartment. Through the thick wall I could even distinguish the details of fingers pressing the keys. Several nights I took a flashlight and quietly walked to the door. The door was covered in thick dust, and through the crack I could see a piano covered by a cloth inside. The door lock looked rusty but not completely sealed. One night the piano music suddenly stopped. Inside came low coughing footsteps followed by heavy dragging sounds like someone was moving furniture. That moment sent chills down my spine and made my back cold. I decided to try knocking on the door the next day. There was no response, only cold wind blowing through the cracks. When I turned back I saw a dark shadow flash past at the end of the hallway, too fast, like a ghost. My curiosity and fear grew together. I started searching online about that unit's history. I found out the man was once accused of being involved in an unsolved disappearance case. It was said that night he played the piano and then vanished. Some suspected suicide, while others guessed he was hiding some dark secret. At night the piano music became more frequent. Sometimes I heard whispers along with the piano, like someone was speaking softly or crying out in pain. One night I gathered courage and at midnight lifted the old cloth to peek inside. Through the broken window the piano keys looked stained white, keys mottled as if covered with an unknown liquid. I glimpsed an old box in the corner, its lid half open. Inside seemed stacked with thick diaries and photos. In the darkness I felt a pair of eyes staring at me. Frightened I ran back to my room, locking doors and windows tight. That night I dreamed I sat before the piano, but my fingertips pressed not keys but cold bones. The next day I called the police. They came and opened the door. Inside was empty. The piano was still old and the box in the corner gone. But they found a yellowed photo under the piano bench. The man in the photo had his eyes blacked out. Behind him was a locked secret room. The investigation showed the secret room was deep in the apartment basement. With police escort we went down to the basement. In the dark space a rusty iron door hid in a corner wrapped in chains. When police pried the door open a stench hit us. Inside were piles of bones, rotten clothes and an old diary with messy handwriting. The diary recorded the man's descent into madness, his suspicion of his wife's betrayal and his attempt to break a family curse through playing the piano. The most chilling part was the last page, which said, "Only when the soul is trapped in the keys can the truth be revealed." Since that day the piano music stopped and the apartment returned to silence, but I knew the secret of that hidden room still held a darkness yet to be uncovered.